Today I would like to cover two topics: is life worth living and antinatalism. For those of you who don't know what antinatalism is, it's the idea that we shouldn't have kids in an attempt to wipe out all life, because life is a bad thing. Is life worth living? Can you really reduce life to the amount of suffering and the intensity of that suffering versus the amount of pleasure and the intensity of that pleasure, and then come up with some kind of calculation to determine whether the life is overall positive or negative? I would argue that's a reasonable model, but it's missing one fundamental point, and this has to do with death and what happens after death. When you're alive, what happens to you when you're dead isn't happening. I'll get into death later, but I'd first like to talk about life, and is there an intrinsic general bias towards suffering or pleasure? I would argue for two reasons that nature is biased towards suffering. The first reason being that life is a very complex and intricate design placed in this environment which is hostile. The human body is much like a deck of cards out in an open field. Something is bound to knock it over sooner or later. The second reason being, I think that suffering is more sustainable. Imagine that we took the conditions for pain and pleasure and reversed them, so that the things that cause you pleasure now cause you pain, and the things that cause you pain now cause you pleasure. Well, I'll tell you this much: it would be very easy to be in a perpetual state of euphoria. You just take a hammer and whack yourself, and that would be the equivalent of a week, 2 weeks worth of euphoric pleasure. Consider the amount of effort it takes to experience intense euphoria. People will have to win the Olympics. People will have to have sex with a really hot person. People will have to find true love to experience these intense euphorias. But to experience intense suffering is so incredibly easy. Imagine the following scenario. This is actually a bit like the plot of Terminator 2 now that I think about it. There's two robots and a child, and the first robot's aim is to make the child suffer, and the second robot's aim is to make the child happy. Both robots have equal capabilities and equal intelligence. It's obvious which robot is going to win, and that's the one that's trying to cause the child to suffer. It takes a lot of resources to sustain a happy, healthy life. But to destroy a happy, healthy life, all it takes is one bullet from a gun. Now, of course, this is a philosophical outlook on reality, but when we look at the evidence, I think that it really does back up that theory. With all of mankind's intelligence, positive thinking, and resources to avoid suffering, we're still not capable of this task. People who have the best lives in the world are still going to have intense suffering. Consider the following scenario. You have one of two choices. The first choice is you take 100% guarantee of eternal non-existence. You experience nothing, no pleasure, no suffering, nothing. The second choice is I flip a coin. And if the coin lands on heads, you experience eternal euphoria. And if it lands on tails, you experience eternal torment. I think any cautious person, or anybody who's tasted the flavor of suffering, is going to pick the eternal non-existence. I might be wrong, and it would be interesting to actually carry out a study on that. From my experience, though, the vast majority of sensible people pick eternal non-existence. If you wouldn't be willing to take this gamble with your own life, then it would obviously be immoral to impose this onto somebody else. It seems like the obvious moral choice is to eradicate life. And the most humane way possible to eradicate life is just to simply stop having kids. Where I would disagree with antinatalism is the premise of not so much what is life, but what is life preventing? What is death? So if death is this random coin toss, and there could be any other horrors out there, I think it's actually less of a gamble to propagate human life, because human life is moving in the direction of morality and progress. Quite simply, a moral, intelligent government is inevitable. If you look back 1,000 years ago, and what was considered normal. You look at these medieval torture devices. I tell you, look up the worst torture devices on YouTube. Just search it up. And, it's kind of mind-blowing, but things like that were common. Now we have human rights. Now we have more technology, and our ability to improve and sustain human well-being and health is continually going up. To end human life would eradicate all moral progression and bring nature back to animalistic barbarism. While life isn't so great for many people, we have no idea what kind of other horrors are out there. And if we can get life to the point where it's reasonably okay, I think that is something that we should try to push as much existence into that form as possible. And so there'll be a new dawn for humanity. How's that for poetic? If you like this video, subscribe, check out my other videos, and if you have a video request of your own or topic you'd like me to do, leave it in the comments below. I do every video request ever. Alright, check this out. This is just the sun rising, but I don't think many people realize how fast the sun actually rises. You can actually see it moving in real time.